just talking, putting you guys to fucking sleep, all right? I actually want you guys to talk about it, to share some of your experiences, stories, or some of the thoughts that you have, because I think that's actually the most important part of this whole process. We're not really accustomed to talking about our non-belief because we figure, I don't know, I guess non-belief feels like a weird thing to talk about, right? Who's going to talk about, I don't believe in the fairies, I don't believe in trolls, let's have a conversation about that, eh? Now, one of the things that I want to talk to you about today actually is evolution. I'm going to be talking a lot about it. I don't know generally how familiar, show of hands here again, how many people are very familiar with evolutionism? You're very familiar? So if I was to ask you a question like, what is punctuated equilibrium, your answer is? Okay, so maybe you're moderately educated about it. And that's fine. That's fine. You don't need to be an expert in evolution in order to be able to talk about it. That's the beauty of evolution. It's actually a really simple idea, but I think it's really generally misunderstood by most people. So I'm glad most of you are really kind of aware of it. And it's probably no coincidence that, as an atheist, it's probably one of the places you want to start, right? You're like, well, I had one guy ask me a question once on one of my radio shows, probably the only live one I ever did. And he was like, why is it that everybody who doesn't believe always mentions the origin of species? And you're like, well, at first I didn't actually know how to answer that question. That is kind of a good question. Why do we always talk about it? Well, the answer, I believe, is actually because of what evolution really means. It means that there is no greater design or purpose to the existence of life. It's just a way of explaining how life develops, how life changes gradually into sometimes more complex forms, sometimes not. And when it's I don't think it's a coincidence that the guy who came up with it, well, became really an atheist. I think once you really kind of understand the implication, you're like, holy shit, there is no God. Because before then, it was kind of natural to assume that life arose from a divine origin. I mean, you guys are familiar with God in the gaps argument, right? You've probably heard this all the time. Someone's like, well, we don't know everything, therefore God probably created everything. And you're just like, I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure that's true. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to just answer about evolution. But first, I'd like to, I want to ask any of you out there, sort of like, because not everybody lifted up their hands regarding evolution. Is there any general question about evolution that any of you would like to ask? Anybody? No?
What's punctuated equilibrium?
Okay, punctuated equilibrium is a theory that was thought of by Stephen Jay Gould, who basically said that rather than changes being gradual, that they sometimes might happen actually kind of like leaps and bounds. So not in any sort of like suddenly you grow a wing, but that the difference would be sort of great enough that it would spread really rapidly within the population. It's not really something that most people believe anymore, actually. Neo-Darwinism has come back in a big way. Everybody sort of like accepts that, no, it looks like things are very gradual and it's a slow process. That's why it's kind of hard for people to study or even understand, You're dealing with millions and millions and millions of years just to see some changes. And a lot of times, even in the span of, say, 100 million years, a species might not change very much. Or it could change drastically. It's difficult to tell. But yes, that's punctuated equilibrium. Thank you for asking, by the way. So now everybody knows what that is. You.
Sometimes people ask, well, evolution explains things in such a random way, like it was all random chance. And
right.
There must have been some sort of divine creator behind it. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think that's the funny thing about evolution, right? Everybody says, it's so random, and really it's clearly not random. I mean, you have to understand that descent with modification is an entirely non-random process. I mean, species evolve and change in response to their environment. Now, most of the time when a creature evolves, if it has a random mutation, most of the time it's bad, right? So, you get another foot, and all of a sudden it starts to hobble you, and you can't move right, or who knows other kinds of problems. But once in a while, it's a positive change, and if it is more advantageous, it will spread within the population. And this is how things normally change. But it is a common misconception that people have that it is random. And I think that this is one of the ways that people dismiss evolution. They say, well, it's random, and that means that there's, like the chance of that happening is infinitely small, and you're like, no. We even see evolution happening in everyday life. I mean, one of the ways that we see is actually through fruit flies that we do a lot of testing on, because these things are really easy to study. I mean, they take only a few days to germinate. Well, gestate, I suppose is a better word. And they're very simple. I think they only have like something like 4 chromosomes, so they're very easy to manipulate. And we have shown, even in lab work, that these species, the species can change, can evolve gradually. Of course, do I have to sell you on evolution? I hope I don't. But the one thing, yeah.
I was going to say, somebody actually asked me that question, and I said that an airplane is designed, Boeing draws up plans and builds it.
Right.
You don't find bits of a Wright brothers plane in there.
No.
If you look at DNA and the body structure of human beings, you do find bits of earlier.
Well, one of the most surprising things they found when they really started first studying DNA is that they started sort of exchanging genes with certain things. So they take a gene from, say, a monkey and they put it in a rat, thinking all of a sudden this rat's going to come out with some weird monkey limbs. But surprisingly enough, nothing really happened. And it's because we share a lot of DNA with one another. I mean, take a banana. You share about 50% of the same genes as a banana. And that seems to be pretty surprising, right? You were like, well, a banana looks so different. But you have to understand that life, there really is only one kind of life. Just it has lots of different variations. So you're one of those variations, and a fern is another type of variation. There's just tons of it. It's easier to think of life as, say, think of the Earth as a bit of a sponge, right? In the middle or in the mantle, there's billions and trillions, and I can't even tell you how many individual bacteria there is on this planet. To give you an idea of how much bacteria there really is, like the most simple life form, roughly 70% of all biomass on this planet is actually bacteria. So if you think that you're really special, you're like, oh, I'm the king of this world. No, actually bacteria pretty much, they run everything. And it's a good thing too, because there's been so many mass extinctions over years that sometimes the only thing that survived is really simple bacteria. Thank goodness for that, right? Now, the one thing I want to sort of like answer is, why is it so hard for people to accept evolution? I mean, you probably have friends, family members that say, well, I really don't believe it. Or they say, it's just a theory. Have most of you heard this sort of just a theory thing? Yeah, I get sick of it too myself. I'm like, I don't think you understand what theory means. It's not just a guess.
Gravity's a theory.
Exactly. Gravity's a theory. And nobody's questioning. Nobody's jumping out their window saying, it's just a theory, everybody. I don't think that's going to help. But one of the reasons, there's roughly about 3 reasons why evolution is so hard to accept. And the first one is that it has no purpose. When you really realize that if you do what Stephen Jay Gould said, if you turn back time and you go back to the Berga scale, which is roughly when the Cambrian explosion happened, where all these different types of life started evolving. If you go all the way back to that time, and if you were to replay the tape and say this tiny little worm with the first ancestors of all vertebrates, there's no real reason to suspect that this would exist. It's not like this is clearly the best animal. There's no reason to expect that it would, but that's your ancestor. And if you turn back that clock and you went forward again, there's absolutely no reason to expect that any of us would be here, that there'd be vertebrates at all. Maybe it'd be just gigantic flying jellyfish. I don't know. That's the thing about life. It's very diverse. I think I remember they were saying that the possible combinations of life, because of the way the DNA works, is roughly 10 to the power of 3,400,000. So that's enough zeros that it would take roughly 5 regular-sized volumes to just put that amount of zeros in it. It's a lot of zeros, right? That's the possible combinations, different types of life forms that there could be. It's almost infinite. I mean, to give you perspective, the amount of atoms present in the universe is about 10 to the power